Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about my must-draft sleepers as we approach our upcoming 2025 fantasy football draft. I'll be talking about 7 players who, based on their current ADPs, are all steals and sleeper options going into 2025. And this is a video that I've talked about in prior seasons, going back to 2023, in which I mentioned players like Nico Collins, Devon Achane, Jordan Addison, Sam Laporta, Zay Flowers, and Adam Thielen before their breakout seasons. Even going back to last season, in which I mentioned Chase Brown, Brian Thomas Jr., Jonnu Smith, and Khalil Shakir. And sure, I'm still not going to forget that I put Josh Palmer on that list instead of Ladd McConkey, but I got too cute with it. But going into this upcoming season, we begin with a player such as Ricky Pearsall, because I truly do believe that based on his current ADP, looking at wide receiver 44 on ESPN, 41 on Sleeper, and 41 on Yahoo, these are incredible values based on where I have him currently ranked, and I'm trying to leave every single draft with Ricky Pearsall. And how did I become so confident on his potential going into 2025? Well, there's a recipe for success for a player like Ricky Pearsall. Again, he's a former first-round selected wide receiver in the 2024 NFL Draft. He plays within a Kyle Shanahan offense, which again, is a lot of value, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And there's very little target competition within this 49ers offense as it currently stands as we go into week 1. So let's begin by talking about the pedigree of being a former first-round selected wide receiver in the NFL Draft. Specifically, in the last 5 seasons, 2020 to 2024, there have been 28 total first-round selected wide receivers, 19 of which stayed healthy in their rookie year, which of course does not include Ricky Pearsall, considering he missed a pretty extraneous amount of time. But of the 19 who played 15 games minimum, those rookies on a 17-game pace were averaging about 119 targets and 172.5 fantasy points within their rookie season. 14 of those 19 wide receivers that were healthy in their rookie campaign were able to rank within the top 36 of the wide receiver position, which is a 74% success rate. So even though Ricky Pearsall wasn't able to find himself immediate success in year 1 because of the injury that he had, of course, we now look to year 2 for the potential of him growing. And when we look at the wide receivers who stayed healthy going from year 1 to year 2, there were 20 wide receivers that had healthy sophomore campaigns in their NFL career. Of those wide receivers, 14 of them were able to have themselves improvements on their fantasy point per game averages in year 2, which is a 70% success rate. Again, there's a lot of potential for Ricky Pearsall considering where he was drafted and the talent that he has. Now, when you add that talent into a Kyle Shanahan offensive scheme, of course, you're going to find upside for success. Kyle Shanahan has been an offensive coordinator or primary play caller of an offense since 2008. And in the last 17 seasons of his career, he's been able to produce 17 total top 36 ranked wide receivers in fantasy football. And when we look at the recent history of his success with the 49ers, in the last 4 seasons, he's been able to produce at least a minimum of 1 top 25 wide receiver in fantasy in each of those last 4 years. But when we go back to 2023, Ayuk and Debo were both top 14 at the position. And again, there's a lot of potential for Ricky Pearsall to kind of join the likes of Ayuk and Debo this upcoming season based on the opportunity shares that they have recently seen and the fact that they will no longer be competing for those opportunities within this offense. Like I mentioned earlier, there's not much target competition within this offense because Brandon Ayuk is still recovering from the ACL injury he sustained last season. Debo Samuel now plays for the Washington Commanders, and Juwan Jennings has injured his calf, and there's even rumors about him potentially starting on the IR if his injury progresses in the wrong direction. So with Demarcus Robinson also facing a suspension, there's very little target competition at the wide receiver position. And sure, Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle are going to get themselves targets, but George Kittle hasn't seen more than 95 targets since 2019. So I'm confident that Ricky Pearsall is going to be the number 1 wide receiver of a Kyle Shanahan offense that has proven year over year for the last 17 seasons to be of value. And when we continue on to the potential of Ricky Pearsall, you wouldn't trade away a Debo Samuel after a Brandon Ayuk ACL injury unless you were confident in his potential. And the temperature check late last season in week 17 and 18, taking on the Detroit Lions, in which he had 10 targets, 8 catches, 141 and a touchdown for 24.7 half PPR fantasy points, then followed it with the next week of a great performance of 8 targets, 6 catches, 69 and a touchdown against the Arizona Cardinals for 16 fantasy points. That kind of momentum continued to build in the direction of Ricky Pearsall and gave confidence to the organization to move on from Debo Samuel. And going into this offseason and this training camp in specific, there's been a lot of positivity that has revolved around Ricky Pearsall, him being the number 1 option of Brock Purdy, and their rapport continuing to build within this training camp. And in the one preseason game that both Brock Purdy and Ricky Pearsall played against the Raiders, on the first drive, he ran 7 routes, he was targeted 4 times, had 3 receptions for 42 yards. I truly do believe that Ricky Pearsall at his current ADP, wide receiver 41 to 44, is an absolute steal and has league-winning upside. Now, speaking of league winning and the potential of you winning a 2025 fantasy football championship, for those of you who are trying to give yourself a better chance of doing so, be sure to subscribe to the channel as we're making daily content for the entirety of the season. Also live streaming later tonight and over the course of this week and over the course of the entire season, answering your questions. But besides that, for those of you who want an advantage upon your league mates for your upcoming drafts and for the remainder of the season, be sure to travel down to the description of the video and check out Betr. I'll be partnering with them for the entirety of the season, not only providing picks, which we'll share over the course of today's episode, but of course providing rankings. These are rankings by position, by tier, half PPR, full PPR, at the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, defense, and flex positions. So for those of you who want an advantage upon your league mates for these upcoming drafts over the course of the month of August, again, these rankings will be updated weekly, but also every single Sunday morning for the remainder of the season in order to help you set your lineups. Be sure to check out Betr. Use code Andrew today, make that first time deposit minimum of $10, and make that first time play minimum of $1 within the Betr Picks section, picking more or less on a given player's statistics. And go ahead and check out the right side of the screen, because once you go ahead and check out the map, it'll determine your eligibility based on your current location. And if you play up to $10 today, you get up to $30 instantly. So take advantage of the opportunity today, get those rankings, and of course, get playing with Betr. Thank you. All right, let's continue on by talking about the next sleepers that I wanted to mention, beginning with Tank Bigsby of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, before I get into talking about Tank Bigsby in specific, over the course of the last 2 seasons, I've honed in on the Miami Dolphins backfield in 2023 and the Cincinnati Bengals backfield in 2024. So I have now identified the potential breakout this season being from the Jacksonville Jaguars backfield. And I'm not talking about Travis Etienne today. I'm specifically talking about Tank Bigsby because his current ADP on ESPN, Sleeper, and Yahoo sits at RB40, RB40, and RB37. So if we have a potential of a breakout taking place, it's from the running backs that we are going to be investing far less draft capital within and then potentially taking over the job as the season progresses. I'm not saying that he's going to immediately come out in week 1 and dominate, but there's a chance that as time progresses and he proves that he is the better back and better functioning option for this offense, that he'll get more love from Liam Cohen and this new regime. Again, like we've mentioned all offseason, Liam Cohen is the new head coach and primary play caller of the Jacksonville Jaguars, the former OC of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2024. Of course, last season, Liam Cohen utilized both Rachaad White and Bucky Irving as a combination of a backfield, and there's an opportunity in which Etienne can function as the Rachaad White, the pre-established running back, and Bigsby could be the Bucky Irving, to where he comes in and takes the job away completely and is able to get himself enough of an opportunity share within this backfield to be incredibly relevant. And when we talk about the opportunity share of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and what Liam Cohen allowed those running backs to see every single week, they're the 4th most opportunities, which is a combination of rushing attempts and targets amongst all teams in the National Football League, 522. And just to put it into perspective, the Jaguars ranked 21st in terms of running back opportunities in 2024. The Buccaneers also were number 6 in terms of total rushing attempts at the running back position with 401. Cohen in one singular season transformed that backfield, and he's going to be able to do exactly that for the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2025, because you have a running back like Tank Bigsby who is incredibly efficient. We're talking about 4.59 yards per carry last season, which ranked as number 18 amongst all running backs with 50 rushing attempts minimum. And then he had a 3.77 yards after contact per attempt average, which ranked number 3 amongst all running backs with 50 attempts minimum. In comparison to Travis Etienne, who has been incredibly inefficient in the last 2 seasons, averaging 3.72 yards per carry and 3.77 yards per carry. And in terms of his yards after contact per attempt averages, 2.48 and 2.87. Again, there is a potential in which Tank Bigsby, because of his efficiency, because of his early down prowess, and of course, additionally, because of his red zone ability, can very easily take over this job. Bigsby, amongst all running backs in the Jacksonville Jaguars organization last season, was number 1 in terms of red zone rushing attempts and touchdowns. So if he's going to be the primary goal line back, that is going to elevate his fantasy upside with sprinkles of receiving utilization, because we know he's capable of it. Opportunity leads to success in fantasy football. And in 2024, when given 14 or more touches in a game, was averaging over 16 fantasy points per game in a half PPR scoring format. Now, in the last couple days, sure, we've heard a couple rumors regarding the potential of either Tank Bigsby or Travis Etienne being moved via the trade market. Teams like the Cowboys, Chiefs, Bears, Dolphins, Browns are looking for an active running back, and Tank Bigsby could be that answer. So if you draft him currently at the RB potential 37 to 40, there could be even more return on investment if he is the one shipped out and he becomes an automatic starter for another team, or potentially if Travis Etienne is moved, because he's in the 4th year of his NFL deal, they'll potentially have to re-sign him next season. They might want to move away from someone like Travis Etienne in order to get the value out of the potential future of Tank Bigsby and In the event of a trade, the next running back I wanted to mention, BHAYSHUL TUTEN, who I believe amongst the two of these running backs that I just mentioned is the better investment. And I primarily believe that to be the case because of his current ADP of RB54, 62, and 46. Again, if you are able to take a running back this late, that yes, you're not anticipating to make immediate impact week 1, but is more of a lottery ticket, this is the direction that I want to go in. Because I truly do believe with the new coaching staff and the new regime, making a draft day statement of selecting BHAYSHUL TUTEN, even though they had ETN and BIGSBY, they wanted to get their guy of the future in specific. This is again a 4th round selection, a 4.3 speed kind of running back, a guy that in 2024, amongst all running backs, was only behind Ashton Genty in the NCAA in terms of missed tackles forced per carry, and was number 3 amongst all running backs in terms of highest yards created per attempt among the draft class. So if we're going to be in a situation in which BHAYSHUL TUTEN could be this year's Bucky Irving, and again, very similar to Bucky Irving, selected in the 4th round, but eventually got more and more opportunities within this offense. A running back who also has receiving upside, considering in college, in his final 2 years, was able to accumulate 50 receptions at Virginia Tech. Again, a far more capable receiver than many may believe, even though, again, he is a bruiser back in every sense of the word, running teams over, and of course, was able to find himself finding a lot of success within the preseason. Again, between BIGSBY and TUTEN, I know there's going to be value, and I know one of these two running backs is going to supplant Travis Etienne this season. As to when it takes place, again, that is why we're making a sleeper investment, and at his current ADP, it's surely going to be worth it. The next player I wanted to mention is EMEKA EGBUKA, another one of these rookies that, again, is going to find immediate success. And as we look at his ADP across the landscape, wide receiver 42, 45, 43 on Yahoo, Sleeper, and ESPN. I don't understand as to why he is going this late, as I currently have him ranked as a top 36 wide receiver. But again, the reason why I have him as a top 36 wide receiver, besides the fact that he's a former first-round selected wide receiver in the 2025 NFL draft, but again, the circumstance and the situation that he's joining, the opportunity for targets is immediately going to be there, very similar to a Ricky Pearsall. Now, let's go ahead and begin by talking about what it means to be a former first-round selected wide receiver of your NFL draft. I just mentioned this with Ricky Pearsall, but over the course of 2020 to 2024, there were 28 total first-round selected wide receivers, 19 of them in which they had healthy rookie seasons in which they played 15 or more games. Of those 19 wide receivers, 14 of them ranked within the top 36, which is a 74% success rate. And when we take into account the majority of the wide receivers that were top 2 target getters within their offense, which we're expecting EMEKA EGBUKA to be, they had even more potential for upside within that given season. And the reason why EMEKA EGBUKA specifically has the ability to be a top 2 target getter within this offense is because of the circumstance that revolves around Chris Godwin and Jalen McMillan, who are both currently dealing with injuries. Jalen McMillan expected to miss basically half the season, and there is still rumors and reports regarding Chris Godwin not playing up until October. Now, that could be early or that could even be late October, and time will tell. But until we get there, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for someone like EMEKA EGBUKA to come out and dominate. And to quantify that domination, when we look at the number 2 target getters amongst first-round selected rookie wide receivers over the course of the last 5 seasons, they're averaging about 110 targets and 173.6 fantasy points in their rookie season. So we're anticipating that in the absence of Chris Godwin, who last season from weeks 1 through 7 saw 8.86 targets per game and 16.11 fantasy points per game scored. Jalen McMillan, who again, going to miss some time, who from weeks 14 through 18 was averaging over 17.4 fantasy points per game and a half PPR. Mike Evans, again, yes, he's a dominant force, but he's declining. He's not getting any younger. So as we add EMEKA EGBUKA to the entire equation here, there's a lot of target opportunity within this offense. An offense that sure has a new offensive coordinator in the form of Josh Grizzard, but he was the former passing game coordinator of the Buccaneers in 2024. He's going to be utilizing EMEKA EGBUKA as their primary slot receiving option. And once he begins to build momentum in the first month of the season, he's going to run away with this job. And yes, the Buccaneers last season were only ranked 14th amongst all teams in terms of wide receiver targets, but the 3 seasons prior to that, they were top 5 in each of those years, primarily because this most recent season, because of the positive game scripts and being able to run the ball so effectively, it led to less passing attempts. And I expect that to completely shift this season. It'll be far more neutral or potentially even negative game scripts in which EMEKA EGBUKA will be utilized even more within this pass-heavy attack, with Baker Mayfield, of course, continuing to be one of the top-tier quarterbacks in this entire league. EGBUKA will continue to rise alongside of him as his number 2 target getter this season. All right, the next player I wanted to mention is another rookie who, as it currently stands, is tight end 26 or 22 on Yahoo and Sleeper. Mason Taylor of the New York Jets is someone who I truly do believe by the end of this upcoming season is going to be a fantastic option. Now, I'm not saying that he needs to be rostered come week 1, but there's a lot of potential for him to be the number 2 target getter of his respective offense, only behind Garrett Wilson. But let's talk about Mason Taylor and his potential. Again, he was a second-round selection in the 2025 NFL Draft. He's the son of a Hall of Famer, Jason Taylor. And again, I've mentioned it all offseason. He is my favorite sleeper tight end to invest in this offseason. And the primary reason is because when I looked at tight ends such as Sam Laporta in 2023 and Jonnu Smith in 2024, I was looking for offenses that were going to utilize and see high usage shares from their tight ends. And we, of course, found that in the form of Laporta and Jonnu Smith. But going into this upcoming season, the offensive coordinator, their play calling tendencies, and the quarterback's tendency to look in the tight end's direction is also important. So when we talk about Tanner Engstrom, the new OC of the New York Jets, the former passing game coordinator of the Lions from 2022 to 2024, and former Lions tight ends coach in 2022. Yes, he's a first-time offensive coordinator in the National Football League, but he has learned a lot from Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson in this offense from 2022 to 2024 with the Lions ranked 23, 26, and 7 in terms of total tight end targets with 100, 93, and 136. Over the course of those last 3 seasons, the Lions tight ends have scored 32 receiving touchdowns, top 3 in each of those seasons with 9, 11, and 12. So when we get down into the red zone, and of course we have Justin Fields, Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, and all the rushing attack and the threat, and the play action game potentially begins to develop. Mason Taylor is going to be the primary threat within the red zone. And like I mentioned earlier, outside of the red zone, there's going to be competition with Garrett Wilson and being able to fend for targets there. But outside of Garrett Wilson, we have Josh Reynolds, Alan Lazard, Tyler Johnson, and Jeremy Ruckert. We don't have competition. And very easily can Mason Taylor take over the spot because Justin Fields in his career has favored the tight end position greatly. In the last 18 healthy starts that Justin Fields has had from 2023 to 2024, he targets his tight ends on a per game basis 6.72 times per game, which leads to 10.58 fantasy points per game from his tight ends. Over a 17 game season, we're talking about 114 targets in the direction of his tight ends for 89 catches, 862 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 180 fantasy points and a half PPR. And there's a reason why Cole Kmet in 2022 and in 2023 with the Chicago Bears ranked as the number 7 overall tight end in back-to-back seasons. And in this most recent season, we saw Pat Freiermuth from weeks 1 through 6 with the Pittsburgh Steelers, while Justin Fields was still the starting quarterback there. From weeks 1 through 6, Pat Freiermuth was the number 8 overall tight end within the start of the season. There's a lot of potential here for Mason Taylor. I'm not saying that he's immediately going to be a stud option come week 1, but he is the second tight end that I'm drafting in majority of my leagues, pairing him up with David Njoku, George Kittle's, even Tyler Warren's. It doesn't matter whether I'm drafting late or early. When I want to have a second lottery ticket tight end on roster, Mason Taylor's the answer for me this upcoming season. The next player I wanted to mention is Keon Coleman, who currently sits at an ADP of wide receiver 47, 51, and 53, which again is incredibly low considering the offense he's associated with and the potential for upside he has. Now, sure, he is not like Ricky Pearsall and EMEKA EGBUKA, in which he is a former first-round selected wide receiver. He's a former second-round selected wide receiver in 2024. And even though he didn't live up to the potential of his rookie campaign, from weeks 1 through 9 prior to the injury, averaging 8.08 fantasy points per game on 4 targets per game, which is over 2 fantasy points per target, which is incredibly strong for fantasy purposes. And there's a reason why last season in games in which he had 5 or more targets was averaging over 12 fantasy points per game. Keon Coleman in his rookie campaign, even though he did miss time due to an injury and they did bring in Amari Cooper and there was a lot of shuffling around with this offense, he did end up accumulating 29 receptions for 556 yards, 4 touchdowns, averaging about 7.5 fantasy points per game, which is incredibly similar to the stat line of Gabriel Davis in his rookie campaign with the Bills. 35 catches, 599, and 7 touchdowns, 8.6 fantasy points per game. So can we see a Gabriel Davis-esque breakout season going forward, in which he's going to average anywhere between 9, 10 to 11 fantasy points within this upcoming season? Considering the target competition only consists of, in my mind, Khalil Shakir at the wide receiver position, I'd say that Dalton Kincaid is certainly competition, but he is still going to have to fend for his own targets. But when we're talking about wide receivers, no more Amari Cooper, no more Matt Collins, and yes, Josh Palmer is in the mix. But we learned from last season, Josh Palmer isn't somebody to worry about based on what Ladd McConkey showed us. So when we follow the history of a former second-round selected wide receiver in the 2024 NFL Draft, Ladd McConkey, and now Keon Coleman being able to shoo away Josh Palmer from all the target opportunity that he's going to see. Expect Keon Coleman to dominate. In the preseason with the first team offense, played 14 of the 18 total snaps, playing primarily as the X receiver, and I'm expecting him, of course, alongside of Josh Allen, to be the primary threat within this red zone outside of the rushing attack. Again, the rushing touchdowns that we continue to see Josh Allen and, of course, James Cook accumulate are incredibly high, but we're anticipating James Cook's overall rushing touchdown total to decrease from 16, which tied with Jahmyr Gibbs and Derrick Henry for most amongst all running backs in the 2024 season. So if that number decreases, of course, the other weapons of this offense are going to be red zone threats, and Keon Coleman, in my mind, is going to be that number one option. Besides the deep ball, the red zone receiving going to elevate him this season. Now, before we continue to the final player, I do want to remind you guys, for those of you who want my 2025 fantasy football draft guide, you can find that exclusively on my Patreon today. Again, when you go ahead and head on over there, not only will you be granted access with the subscription to my draft guide, my draft rankings, but also Discord community server access, which is private. And of course, you can ask me unlimited questions. So for those of you interested, be sure to check that out today. More information down in the description. Let's close out today's video with the final rookie. This is Jaydon Blue of course, the Dallas Cowboys. I've talked about Jaydon Blue all offseason. And because of, not really much hype building for him in the preseason and his overall kind of performances, I think that actually bodes well for many of us because his current ADP still sits at RB 47, 54, and 49, which makes him a perfect selection for our final rounds. Because first and foremost, I'm not expecting Jaydon Blue to come out and dominate week one. In fact, I anticipate Javonte Williams to be the starting running back of this team come week one. And I actually prefer it as they take on the Eagles, but we'll get to that in just a moment. But this is why these players are sleepers. I don't expect Mason Taylor or Jaydon Blue or BHAYSHUL TUTEN to run away with the jobs in week one. If they do so, incredible. But I expect them over time to build on their rookie campaign and dominate. And that's what we're going to see from Jaydon Blue, as the competition in this backfield of Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders is not enough to hold him back from being the starting running back of the Dallas Cowboys sooner rather than later. Now, again, when we're talking about the potential of a Dallas Cowboys running back, this time last year, we talked about Ezekiel Elliott or Rico Dowdle. Who are we investing in? And we all made the mistake of thinking that Ezekiel Elliott was going to impact Rico Dowdle in any sort of fashion. And for those of you who invested in Rico Dowdle or picked him up off the waiver wires, he clearly became the RB1 of this team at week 3. And from that point forward, from weeks 3 through 18, 19 opportunities per game on average and 12.3 fantasy points per game in a Brian Schottenheimer offense, who is now the head coach rather than the offensive coordinator. And he's going to continue to run the ball because that's what he knows over the course of his career. 2018 to 2020, Chris Carson ranked as a top 17 running back for fantasy purposes in each of those 3 seasons with the Seahawks. And of course, in the last 2 seasons as the OC of the Dallas Cowboys, he has helped Rico Dowdle rank as 22 and Tony Pollard rank as 15. So going into this year, Javonte Williams is going to be the starter come week 1. And they're going to take on the Philadelphia Eagles, who are an incredible run-stopping defense. And Javonte Williams, who has proven that he has passed his prime years since he has torn his ACL, averaging only 3.61 yards per carry and 2.52 yards after contact per attempt, I am anticipating Jaydon Blue to be able to come in and spell Javonte Williams on the receiving down opportunities. And when he does so and can prove that he is a solid receiving back, just in the same way in which Rico Dowdle did last season, I mean, again, Blue in his final year of college, 61 targets, 42 receptions, 368 receiving yards, and 6 receiving touchdowns. Again, he's going to be able to take over potentially all 3 downs of work. And sure, they're going to have their fullback out there, catching a couple passes here and there. But I truly do believe in terms of a late round investment and a sleeper option, Jaydon Blue certainly is one of these must draft sleepers going into the 2025 season. That's going to cover it for me today. I'll be live streaming later this afternoon. And of course, talking about my favorite picks of the 2025 season in tomorrow's video. So until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.